Good morning, Year 10. So, I'm going to carry on with our topic on ecology by just quite a short lesson on some key ecological terms which you need to know in order to carry on with the rest of this course. So, today is basically going to be a lot of learning of key terms, unfortunately, but they are key terms that are important. To start, there's 3 questions here, and what I'd like to see in your books is the answers to these 3 questions, just the answers, not the questions. So, pause me and have a go at that, please. Right, so the difference between a pyramid of biomass and a pyramid of numbers is that a pyramid of numbers shows how many of each species are in an area. A pyramid of biomass shows the total biomass of each species within an area. So the biomass being the dry weight of an organism. So the total biomass of an organ of the species is shown in a pyramid of biomass. What are they used for? They're used, well, pretty much just told you to be fair, but they're used broadly to assess to assess the amount of an organism in an area is a good way of putting it, and the viability of a food chain. What happens to the amount of biomass available as you move up the trophic levels? Why? Well, it goes down because you waste energy on heat from respiration, on movement. You also lose some through excretion, some through not eating a whole organism, and you lose some in growth. Fine. So today we're basically going to work through these key terms and talk about what each one is. So when we're talking about ecology, we're talking about the relationship between organisms and their environment. Now your environment is made up of 2 different kinds of things. It's made of biotic organisms, things that are living, and abiotic factors, things that are not living. Now, when I say an abiotic factor, a not living factor, I don't mean just anything that isn't alive in an area. An abiotic factor is only an abiotic factor if it directly affects the survival and reproduction of biotic factors. So, if I'm looking around this room, and I have a look over here, I can see there's a whole load of pencils. These pencils are not abiotic factors unless they directly affect my survival or reproduction. So if I happen to meet a person who's very interested in me who happens to really like pencils, then it becomes an abiotic factor because it's important that I have one. But otherwise it is not. Alright? So if it doesn't affect survival and reproduction, it is not an abiotic factor. So have a look at this. Oh, incidentally, pause me and take these notes down. You have to know this. It's very important. It comes up a lot. So have a look at this. There is a picture there, and I'd like you to write down as many different biotic and abiotic factors as you can. Just a simple T table, don't draw out every line, just a straight line there and a straight line there. Abiotic, biotic. And I will give you, usually takes 2 or 3 minutes for this. So, biotic factors. Let me give you a list. You've got the bird up here, you've got the fish, deer, beehive here with bees, you've got grass, plants, trees, and that's all I can really see. Maybe I'm missing something. Fine. Abiotic factors. You've got the water, and therefore the amount of precipitation. So things like that cloud up there is also an abiotic factor because it's going to rain eventually on them. You've got things like the temperature, which you can't necessarily see, but you know is there. You've got the amount of oxygen in the air. You can't necessarily see it, but you know that it's there. You've got shelters, for instance, there might be underneath these rocks and things, there might be bugs. That would be an abiotic factor because it would help the bugs to survive. That kind of an idea. Right, so the next question we have to think about is what is an ecosystem? So I'm sure we've all heard of this term before, but what is an ecosystem? Well, the word ecosystem simply means a community of different individuals and species and all of the non-living factors within an environment that affect them. So, we're talking about not only the living things in an area, but also the abiotic factors. So, within my ecosystem inside this room, I feel I'm probably the only mammal alive. I can see there's a spider up there I should eventually remove, so it's probably just me and the spider in abiotic factors. excuse me, in biotic factors, biotic. But in terms of abiotic factors, there are lots. So part of my ecosystem is the temperature in this room, part of my ecosystem is the humidity in this room, part of my ecosystem is the availability of water in this room, and so on and so forth. But there can be an ecosystem within a very small area. When we talk about ecosystems, we tend to talk about much larger areas. So you'll hear quite a lot about the Amazonian ecosystem being damaged by forest fires. And so we're talking about not only the animals being killed, but also the shelters being wiped out, the rocks being destroyed, which are being used by bugs. We're talking about water evaporating and being lost, and this kind of thing. So again, and I appreciate that there will be quite a lot of notes this lesson, unfortunately. Can you please get down those notes? Now, there is another key term here, community. It's one of the last key terms. So community is the living components within an ecosystem. It's defined as all the different populations living in an area, all the different species living in an area. So what's the key difference there between that and an ecosystem? Well, the key difference is that ecosystems include abiotic factors and the word community doesn't. So let's say I was saying I want to save the Amazonian ecosystem, but really all I wanted to save was the animals. I don't really care about the rocks and the water. Do I really care about those? Probably not. Then what I actually want to say is I want to save the Amazonian community, because the community is all of the living things in an area. The community in my room is me and the spider. We are the community. Now, this is the final one, I believe. Yes, I'm right. And this is habitat. Now, a habitat is the area in which a particular type of organism usually lives. Now, that will include both biotic and abiotic factors. So, for instance, my habitat, yes, it's this house that I'm living in. Your habitat is your house. Your habitat also includes the people you live with, though, so it will be your family. Any animals you live with, that's part of your habitat. If they were removed, it would be a slightly different habitat. The prey you will feed on, part of your habitat. So your supermarket is part of your habitat. That's all one habitat. So the question, how many habitats can you see here? Well, the answer could vary. The answer will vary depending on the number of species that use it. If it's just the elk and there's nothing there, other than the elk, there's only one habitat, his habitat. He's got this grass which he eats, this water which he eats, he's got these lovely hills over here he walks around on. If there are fish in the river, they have a different habitat. Their habitat doesn't include the grass or any of the things up here. It will include some things he's not interested in, like water weeds. But every different organism has its own habitat. Right. So, we need to have a look at this. Now, this is kind of a summary. And I'd like you to please write this out, because once you've got this summarizes the whole thing. And you can kind of just glance at this to remind you which one's biotic, which one's abiotic, which one's community, which one's ecosystem. So this should be written out in full. And it's just a tick box exercise. If you think that ecosystems contain both biotic and abiotic factors, you put a tick in ecosystem. Now, I will give you, usually this will take 5 or 6 minutes because there's quite a lot of writing there, I appreciate. So pause me and complete this. Right, let's go through the answers. Just check that you're right, correct yourself if you're wrong. Well, incidentally, I'm still seeing some people who are just blatantly waiting for me to give you the answers. Do have a go before I give you the answers. It's fine to be wrong. It will actually help you to learn if you're wrong. So it contains both biotic and abiotic factors. Ecosystem, yes. That's kind of the definition of ecosystem. The ecosystem is all of the biotic and abiotic factors in an area. Habitat, yes. Habitats include not only the place you live, which is usually abiotic unless you're a parasite, but it's also the things you eat, the people you interact with, that's all part of your habitat. So yes, biotic and abiotic. Community? No. No. Just biotic community. Includes all living organisms in an area. Ecosystem? Yes, the ecosystem does contain all the living organisms in an area, as well as all the non-living factors that affect them. Community? Yes, it does. Contains all the living factors in an area. Habitat? Not so much. Habitats only have usually one species in them. Refers solely to biotic factors, that's just community. We talked about that earlier. Organisms may live in this. Well, it depends how you define in this. Habitat, definitely, absolutely. Ecosystem, I would agree, yes, because ecosystems contain all the abiotic factors. An ecosystem is almost the intersection between a habitat and a community. May contain many different species. Ecosystem, yes. Habitat, no. Community, yes. Right. Now, last thing we're going to touch on is the factors that will affect the survival of an organism. So I'd like you to write down factors in an ecosystem affecting organism survival, and then a list, please. What can you think of? Every little bit you can think of. Right, so here's my list. There's lots of others you could have. There's my list of important ones. Predation, so predators, that affects their likelihood of survival. Competition, food, you have water, you could have areas for rest or sleep, you could have temperature, you could have humidity, you could have geology, you have parasites, you could have diseases. There's an enormous amount. But you need to be able to give a few in answer to any question you're asked about it. Now that is the end of that. And I think it's a fairly simple lesson. The difficulty of this lesson is in the fact that you have quite a lot of key terms to learn. So you need to learn what abiotic, biotic, ecosystem, community, habitat mean. Those 5 terms, if you know what they mean, and you can define them, and you can give examples of them, and you could, if you're given information about something, tell them whether it's a habitat, an ecosystem, or a community, then you have no difficulties and you've got it. So quite a short one today, I think, if I'm not wrong. It's only just under a 15-minute video, so have a nice break for the end of the lesson unless you've got anything else to do.